In an increasingly chaotic world, where distractions, crises, and emotional turmoil seem to bombard us daily, the ability to maintain serenity has become a rare and valuable skill. Life presents us with countless challenges, financial struggles, social pressures, unexpected setbacks. But what truly determines our level of peace is not the events themselves, but how we respond to them. The Stoics understood this well. They knew that serenity is not the absence of problems, but the mastery of one's internal state despite external circumstances. The ability to remain composed under pressure, to cultivate a mind that is undisturbed by the fluctuations of life, is the ultimate superpower. Serenity is not passivity. It does not mean avoiding responsibility, suppressing emotions, or ignoring difficulties. Rather, it is a disciplined state of mind that allows us to navigate hardships with wisdom and composure. It is a shield, not a shield that blocks external events from happening, but a shield that prevents them from piercing our inner peace. When properly cultivated, serenity enables us to think clearly, make better decisions, and act with strength rather than being enslaved by reactive emotions. But how do we develop this shield? How do we cultivate an unshakable serenity that allows us to face life's adversities without being consumed by them? The first step to building a shield of serenity is understanding what is within our control and what is not. One of the greatest sources of distress comes from wasting energy on things that are entirely outside of our sphere of influence. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, said that some things are up to us, and some things are not. Yet, most people live as though everything should be within their control. Other people's opinions, global events, financial markets, relationships, even the weather. This illusion leads to frustration and helplessness. Imagine being stuck in traffic. You can either fume with rage, honking your horn and cursing at the situation, or you can accept that you have no control over it and use the time productively. Listening to an audiobook, practicing deep breathing, or simply observing your thoughts. The situation itself remains the same, but your internal response changes everything. The same applies to greater adversities in life. Losing a job, dealing with criticism, or facing unexpected obstacles. None of these are inherently devastating unless we allow them to be. By training the mind to focus only on what can be controlled, our thoughts, our actions, our responses, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. This doesn't mean we become indifferent to the world, but rather, we engage with it in a way that is both practical and emotionally sustainable. The less energy we waste on the uncontrollable, the more we have to invest in what truly matters. Another powerful tool in cultivating serenity is learning how to detach from immediate emotional reactions. Emotions are natural and necessary, but when they control us rather than the other way around, they become dangerous. Anger, frustration, anxiety. These feelings, if left unchecked, distort reality and lead to impulsive decisions. Emotional detachment does not mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means creating a pause between stimulus and response. It is the ability to observe an emotion without instantly acting on it. This simple act of pausing, of taking a breath before reacting, gives us the space to choose our response rather than be enslaved by an automatic reaction. Imagine receiving harsh criticism at work. A reactive mind immediately feels attacked, insulted, and defensive. A serene mind, however, creates space to analyze the situation logically, questioning whether the feedback is valid, whether there is something to learn from it, and whether the opinion of this person truly defines one's worth. With this approach, what could have been a moment of stress and anger transforms into a moment of growth. One effective method to cultivate emotional detachment is the view from above technique. This practice involves mentally distancing oneself from a situation, imagining it from a higher perspective, almost as if observing life from a mountaintop. By viewing problems from a distance, their emotional intensity diminishes, and their true significance becomes clearer. Serenity is strengthened when we adopt the perspective of an observer rather than a victim. Instead of asking why something is happening, the Stoic mindset asks what can be learned from it. This shift in perspective transforms adversity from an enemy into a teacher. Life is constantly changing. Everything we experience, success, failure, love, loss, is temporary. When we become too attached to any specific outcome, we set ourselves up for suffering. The Stoics remind us that we are merely travelers passing through this world. The things we think we own are only borrowed for a short time. Our jobs, relationships, possessions, even our physical health. By embracing this transient nature of life, we loosen our grip on expectations and allow serenity to take root. Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, practiced this principle daily. Despite ruling over an empire, he constantly reminded himself of the impermanence of life, viewing each challenge as an opportunity to practice virtue. His personal reflections show that true power does not come from external control, but from mastering one's own mind. Theoretical understanding is not enough. Serenity is a skill that must be practiced. Daily reflection on moments of emotional disturbance helps build self-awareness. Creating a pause before reacting, practicing deep breathing, and cultivating gratitude all contribute to developing a resilient mind. The habit of viewing problems from a broader perspective helps maintain clarity in the face of challenges. True serenity is not about escaping the difficulties of life. It's about meeting them with unwavering composure. It is about creating an internal sanctuary that remains untouched by external chaos. By understanding control, practicing emotional detachment, and embracing the observer's perspective, we build a mental fortress that protects us from unnecessary suffering. The world will always present challenges. There will always be obstacles, frustrations, and unexpected turns. But how we experience them, whether as overwhelming threats or manageable challenges, depends entirely on the strength of our inner world. Serenity is not a gift reserved for a few. It is a skill available to all who are willing to cultivate it. And once developed, it becomes the ultimate shield, allowing us to move through life with wisdom, resilience, and unshakable peace. In a world that constantly seeks to provoke reactions, being able to maintain a state of imperturbability is one of the greatest strengths a person can develop. Every day, we are bombarded by external stimuli, news cycles designed to generate outrage, social media feeding emotional responses, people's opinions pushing us to react. Many live as if they are at the mercy of the world around them, swayed by every comment, every setback, and every fleeting emotion. However, the Stoics understood that true strength lies in mastering one's internal world. The ability to remain calm in the face of adversity, unaffected by praise or criticism, and unmoved by external chaos is not indifference, it is power. Imperturbability does not mean passivity or cold detachment. It does not imply apathy or the inability to feel. Instead, it is a conscious decision to choose how one responds to life's inevitable difficulties. It is about developing an inner fortress that remains standing even when the storms of life rage. The Stoics knew that the key to imperturbability is rooted in one fundamental realization. External events have no power over us, only our interpretation of them does. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this principle, constantly reminding himself that nothing outside his mind could truly harm him unless he allowed it to. Whether someone insults us, whether a project fails, whether circumstances do not go as planned, none of these events inherently carry emotional weight. They only have power if we assign it to them. Imagine a person walking through a crowded city, constantly reacting to every noise, every honking car, every conversation happening around them. If they allow each sound, each distraction to affect them, they will never find peace. Now imagine another person in that same environment, walking with deliberate steps, aware of the noise, but not allowing it to dictate their inner state. The world remains the same, but their experience of it is entirely different. This is the essence of imperturbability, not the removal of external disturbances, but the removal of their ability to disturb us. To cultivate this state of mind, it is necessary to train oneself to pause before reacting. Most people operate on impulse. Someone says something offensive, and they immediately lash out. A delay in their plans occurs, and frustration overtakes them. But the Stoic learns to create space between stimulus and response. A brief moment of reflection can make the difference between acting in anger and responding with wisdom. The ability to pause and ask oneself, does this truly matter? Is this worth my peace of mind? Is a habit that, when developed, transforms one's entire approach to life. Another crucial aspect of imperturbability is detaching from the opinions and judgments of others. Many suffer not because of actual hardship, but because they are enslaved by what others think of them. They base their happiness on external validation, constantly seeking approval and fearing criticism. The Stoic, however, understands that external praise or condemnation has no bearing on their intrinsic value. Seneca often reminded his students that living to please others is a guaranteed path to misery. The moment we free ourselves from the weight of public opinion, we begin to experience a level of peace that most never attain. Consider the case of an artist creating a painting. If they paint for the joy of creation, their work is a source of fulfillment. But if they paint only for applause, their happiness becomes dependent on factors beyond their control. If they receive praise, they feel validated. If they receive criticism, they feel inadequate. The external world controls their emotional state. The Stoic approach, however, is to create without attachment to external reception. This mindset applies not only to art but to all aspects of life. Whether in work, relationships, or personal growth, the goal is to act according to one's principles and let go of the need for external validation. Imperturbability also requires an understanding of the impermanence of all things. The world is constantly changing. What seems like a major crisis today will be forgotten in a year. The person who wronged you may not even remember the event that caused your resentment. The financial loss that seems catastrophic now may turn out to be insignificant in the grand scheme of your life. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself of the fleeting nature of all things, seeing everything through the lens of time. This perspective helps prevent unnecessary suffering by reducing the weight we assign to temporary difficulties. One of the greatest tests of imperturbability is dealing with conflict and confrontation. Many people feel the need to argue, to defend their opinions aggressively, to prove themselves right at all costs. But the Stoic recognizes that engaging in unnecessary conflict often does more harm than good. Not every battle is worth fighting, and not every insult requires a response. The ability to remain silent in the face of provocation, to walk away from unnecessary disputes, and to maintain composure even when challenged is one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. True strength is not found in dominating others, but in mastering oneself. A practical exercise in cultivating imperturbability is the practice of voluntary discomfort. The Stoics often engaged in exercises that deliberately exposed them to discomfort, whether through fasting, cold exposure, or wearing simple clothing. The purpose of these exercises was not self-punishment, but training the mind to be unaffected by circumstances. If one can endure hunger without complaint, they will be less likely to be disturbed by minor inconveniences. If one can sit in silence while being criticized, they will develop an unshakable confidence that does not depend on others' approval. By intentionally facing small hardships, the Stoic conditions themselves to remain steady when larger challenges arise. Another powerful tool is visualization. Before facing a difficult situation, the The Stoic prepares mentally by imagining possible difficulties in advance. This practice, known as premeditatio malorum, helps remove the element of surprise, allowing one to respond with calm instead of panic. If one anticipates obstacles before they appear, they will be far less likely to be thrown off balance when they inevitably arise. Imperturbability is not achieved overnight. It is a skill that requires practice, self-awareness, and patience. It involves reprogramming the mind to stop seeking control over external circumstances and instead focus on internal mastery. But once developed, it becomes one of the greatest assets a person can have. A mind that is not easily shaken is a mind that is free. A person who does not depend on external validation is a person who is truly autonomous. In the end, the art of imperturbability is about reclaiming one's power. It is about recognizing that no external event, no comment, no setback has the ability to disrupt inner peace unless we allow it to. The world will continue to test us, but we have the ability to choose our response. We can either be like a leaf in the wind, tossed in every direction by the forces around us, or we can be like a mountain, standing firm, unmoved, and at peace, no matter what storms may come. Life is unpredictable. No matter how carefully we plan, how much effort we put into avoiding problems, obstacles will always appear. It could be the loss of a job, a financial setback, a broken relationship, or even a personal failure. Most people see obstacles as barriers, as forces working against them, preventing them from reaching their goals. But the Stoics had a radically different approach. They believed that obstacles were not roadblocks but stepping stones, challenges designed to strengthen the mind, refine the character, and teach valuable lessons. The Stoic method for overcoming challenges is not about avoiding difficulties, but about using them as fuel for growth. When faced with adversity, we have two choices: resist and suffer, or adapt and transform. One of the core ideas of Stoicism is that perception shapes reality. Events in themselves have no inherent meaning. It is our interpretation of them that determines whether they become burdens or opportunities. A person who loses their job may see it as a disaster, believing their life is ruined. Another person in the same situation might see it as a chance to reinvent themselves, to learn new skills, or to pursue a long-neglected passion. The event itself is neutral. The difference lies in how it is perceived. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, expressed this idea clearly when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very thing that seems to be blocking progress can, if approached correctly, become the means for greater success. This mindset shift is crucial. Instead of reacting emotionally to challenges, the Stoic pauses and analyzes them rationally. They ask themselves, what can I learn from this? How can this situation make me stronger? What is within my control and what isn't? This perspective eliminates unnecessary suffering and directs energy toward productive solutions. Adversity ceases to be something to fear and instead becomes an opportunity for self-improvement. The greatest figures in history, leaders, inventors, and thinkers, are not those who avoided obstacles, but those who faced them head-on and used them as stepping stones toward greatness. Another key aspect of the Stoic method for overcoming obstacles is the ability to detach from external outcomes. Many people suffer not because of what happens to them, but because they are emotionally attached to a specific outcome. They believe that life should go a certain way, that things must unfold according to their expectations. But the Stoics understood that reality does not operate based on personal desires. By accepting this fundamental truth, they freed themselves from frustration and disappointment. When an obstacle appears, the Stoic does not waste energy complaining about how things should have been. Instead, they immediately focus on adapting to what is. This approach allows for greater flexibility, creativity, and resilience in the face of challenges. Adversity also serves as a powerful test of character. It is easy to be virtuous, disciplined, and composed when everything is going well. But true strength is revealed in difficult moments. The Stoics believe that hardship is not a punishment but a training ground, a way to sharpen the mind and cultivate resilience. Seneca compared life to a gladiator's arena, where challenges act as tests designed to refine and improve one's abilities. Each obstacle, no matter how difficult, presents an opportunity to practice patience, courage, and wisdom. A financial loss is a chance to develop resourcefulness. A betrayal is a chance to strengthen one's independence. A failure is a chance to learn humility and perseverance. One of the most effective Stoic techniques for dealing with obstacles is voluntary discomfort. Instead of waiting for hardship to come unexpectedly, the Stoic actively practices going without comfort to strengthen their resilience. This could mean fasting for a day, sleeping on the floor, or exposing oneself to uncomfortable situations deliberately. By doing so, they train their mind to remain composed under pressure, reducing their fear of adversity. When a real challenge arises, they are prepared, knowing they have already endured worse conditions by choice. This practice eliminates the shock factor, making obstacles feel less overwhelming. A fundamental part of transforming obstacles into opportunities is taking responsibility for one's response. Many people shift blame onto external factors, the economy, bad luck, unfair circumstances. But the Stoic understands that while they cannot control what happens, they can always control their reaction. This principle of radical responsibility shifts the focus from external forces to internal strength. It empowers individuals to take action rather than remain passive victims of circumstance. When something goes wrong, the Stoic does not waste time complaining. They ask themselves, what can I do now? What is the next logical step forward? This forward-thinking mentality prevents paralysis and creates momentum, even in difficult situations. In times of crisis, emotional control becomes essential. Fear, anger, and frustration often cloud judgment, leading to impulsive decisions that worsen the situation. The Stoic trains themselves to observe their emotions without being dominated by them. They acknowledge fear but do not let it dictate their actions. They feel anger but do not allow it to cloud their reasoning. They experience disappointment but do not let it turn into despair. This level of self-mastery allows them to act with clarity, even under pressure. A person who controls their emotions in difficult moments has a distinct advantage over those who are ruled by them. Another powerful Stoic strategy is reframing difficulties as lessons rather than misfortunes. Every obstacle contains valuable knowledge about oneself, about others, about the nature of reality. Instead of viewing setbacks as personal failures, the Stoic treats them as teachers. A rejection becomes feedback for improvement. A mistake becomes an opportunity to refine one's approach. This shift in mindset transforms life into a continuous learning process, where every challenge contributes to growth rather than diminishing self-worth. When setbacks are seen as part of the process rather than as final defeats, persistence becomes second nature. The ability to embrace uncertainty is another hallmark of the Stoic mindset. Most fear obstacles because they fear the unknown. They fear losing control over their future, over their security, over their plans. But the Stoic accepts that uncertainty is the natural state of existence. No one truly knows what tomorrow will bring. Instead of resisting this fact, they embrace it, viewing uncertainty as an open field of possibilities rather than a threat. This acceptance removes much of the anxiety that accompanies obstacles, replacing it with curiosity and adaptability. Ultimately, the Stoic approach to obstacles is not just about overcoming difficulties. It is about using them to build a stronger, wiser, and more resilient self. Every challenge faced with the right mindset contributes to growth. The person who learns to transform problems into opportunities is no longer afraid of life's unpredictability. They no longer see themselves as victims, but as architects of their own fate. This shift in perspective creates an unshakable confidence, an inner strength that remains intact regardless of external circumstances. Life will never be free of difficulties. Obstacles will always appear, often at the most inconvenient times. But we have the power to decide how we will face them. We can resist, complain, and let them break us, or we can embrace them as tools for transformation. The Stoics chose the latter path, the path of resilience, adaptability, and wisdom. They knew that the obstacle is not the enemy, it is the way forward. And when we adopt this mindset, we no longer fear challenges. We welcome them as opportunities to become the best versions of ourselves. In a world that constantly demands immediate responses, where people react impulsively to situations without much thought, the ability to pause before acting has become one of the most underrated yet powerful skills. Every day, we face situations that test our patience, challenge our emotions, and tempt us to react without thinking. A harsh comment, an unexpected problem, an insult, or even a moment of frustration can trigger responses that we later regret. But the difference between a person who is controlled by their impulses and someone who acts with wisdom lies in a simple yet transformative habit: the ability to pause. The Stoics understood that the space between stimulus and response is where true power lies. When we allow ourselves to take a moment before reacting, we gain the opportunity to make better decisions, avoid unnecessary conflicts, and cultivate inner peace. Pausing before reacting is not about suppression or avoidance. It is about creating space for reason to take control before emotions take over. Most people assume that their first reaction is always correct because it feels natural, automatic, and urgent. But these immediate responses are often driven by emotions rather than logic. Anger, frustration, and fear push people to act in ways that, in hindsight, seem irrational. The Stoic approach is to resist this impulse, to delay reaction until clarity emerges. When someone insults you, the instinct might be to retaliate immediately, but the Stoic learns to pause and ask, is this response necessary? Will it serve a purpose? Does this situation truly deserve my energy? By creating a moment of reflection before acting, they regain control over the situation rather than allowing the situation to control them. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, constantly reminded himself to step back before reacting. He understood that emotional responses, when unchecked, often lead to unnecessary suffering. Instead of allowing external events to dictate his internal state, he trained himself to pause and examine his emotions with objectivity. This practice prevented him from being easily provoked, manipulated, or overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control. The ability to pause is like a muscle. The more it is exercised, the stronger it becomes. And with time, this small habit creates a profound transformation in the way we experience life. The pause is not only useful in moments of emotional conflict, but also in decision-making. Many of the biggest mistakes people make in life come from acting too quickly, without fully considering the consequences of their choices. Whether in financial decisions, relationships, or career moves, impulsive actions often lead to regret. The Stoic, however, trains themselves to step back, assess the situation from multiple angles, and ensure that their actions align with their long-term values rather than short-term emotions. When faced with a difficult choice, the immediate reaction may be based on fear, pride, or external pressure. But by pausing, the Stoic gains the opportunity to shift from emotional thinking to rational analysis. A useful practice to reinforce the habit of pausing is to imagine oneself as an outsider observing the situation. Instead of reacting as the person involved, one can ask, what would I advise a friend to do in this situation? How would I interpret this event if I were seeing it from a distance? This small mental shift creates the emotional detachment necessary to make wiser decisions. By treating oneself as an observer, rather than the protagonist caught up in the moment, one can approach problems with greater objectivity. Another key benefit of learning to pause is the ability to de-escalate conflicts. Many arguments spiral out of control simply because people do not give themselves time to think before speaking. A moment of silence before responding to criticism can prevent unnecessary confrontation. A brief pause before replying to an accusation can stop a situation from escalating into something destructive. Often, the most powerful response is no response at all. The ability to hold one's tongue, to resist the urge to react emotionally, is one of the greatest forms of discipline. The Stoic understands that not every situation requires an immediate reaction and that silence is sometimes more powerful than words. The modern world, with its constant connectivity and rapid pace, has made impulsivity the norm. People send messages without thinking, respond to emails in frustration, and engage in online debates that drain their energy. But the Stoic approach teaches that not everything requires a response. Pausing before engaging in an argument, before sending an email, or before making a judgment can prevent unnecessary stress and conflict. The ability to delay reaction in the digital world is just as important as in face-to-face interactions. When faced with a situation that triggers an emotional response, the best action is often to do nothing, at least for a moment. Time provides perspective, and perspective leads to better decisions. In moments of crisis, the power of the pause becomes even more evident. When faced with unexpected difficulties, people often panic, reacting out of fear rather than reason. But the Stoic, trained in the habit of pausing, remains steady. They understand that no crisis benefits from impulsive decisions, and that calm analysis is the key to overcoming challenges. When something goes wrong, the first response should not be immediate action but thoughtful observation. Instead of reacting in desperation, one can ask, what is truly happening here? What is within my control? What is the best course of action based on logic rather than fear? This moment of stillness creates clarity, and clarity leads to effective solutions. Pausing also strengthens relationships. Many conflicts in friendships, families, and romantic relationships are caused not by real problems, but by impulsive reactions. A misplaced word, a defensive response, or an assumption made too quickly can create unnecessary tension. But when people learn to pause before reacting, they give themselves the chance to listen, to understand, and to communicate with intention rather than emotion. Relationships improve when people respond with thoughtfulness rather than impulsivity. The Stoic practice of pausing is not only a tool for personal self-mastery, but also a way to build deeper, healthier connections with others. Cultivating the habit of pausing requires practice. In the beginning, the impulse to react immediately is strong, but with conscious effort, one can train the mind to insert a small gap between stimulus and response. This gap, though brief, holds immense power. It is in this space that wisdom is found, that emotional control is exercised, and that better decisions are made. The Stoic understands that true strength is not in reacting quickly, but in responding wisely. The world rewards speed, but wisdom rewards patience. Ultimately, the ability to pause is the key to a life of greater peace, better decisions, and stronger relationships. It is a skill that allows one to navigate challenges with clarity rather than confusion, to handle conflict with composure rather than aggression, and to make choices based on reason rather than impulse. The Stoics knew that mastering this practice leads to an unshakable sense of control over one's life. The world will continue to test us, presenting situations that demand immediate reactions, but we always have the power to take a breath, to pause, and to choose our response. And in that small moment, everything changes. Life is unpredictable, full of uncertainties, and often indifferent to our desires. No matter how much we try to plan and control, unexpected events happen. Relationships change, careers take unexpected turns, and circumstances shift without warning. Many people spend their lives in a constant state of stress, frustration, and disappointment because they attempt to control what is beyond their reach. The more they try to dictate external outcomes, the more they suffer when reality does not align with their expectations. The Stoics understood that the path to true peace does not lie in controlling the external world, but in mastering one's internal world. Instead of resisting the inevitable, they focused their energy only on what was within their control: their thoughts, their actions, and their responses to life's events. This shift in perspective is not just a philosophical idea. It is a transformative way of living that liberates us from unnecessary suffering. The fundamental Stoic principle of control can be summarized in a simple but powerful idea. There are things we can control, and there are things we cannot. Everything outside our mind, other people's opinions, the economy, traffic, the weather, and even our own past, is beyond our influence. No amount of effort, stress, or anxiety can change these things. But what we do control is our perception of these events, our choices, and our responses. This realization is both humbling and empowering. It forces us to stop wasting energy on external circumstances and instead focus on strengthening our inner world. By directing attention to what is truly within our hands, we free ourselves from frustration and develop a sense of stability that no external event can shake. One of the greatest sources of suffering is the desire for control over outcomes. People set expectations about how things should unfold, how others should behave, and how life should reward their efforts. When reality does not conform to these expectations, they experience disappointment, anger, or despair. But the Stoic approach teaches that expectations are often the root of suffering. Instead of demanding that life follows a specific script, the wise person remains adaptable, adjusting to circumstances rather than resisting them. When things do not go as planned, they do not see it as a failure but as a new path unfolding. This flexibility allows them to navigate difficulties with resilience rather than frustration. Another major cause of unnecessary suffering is attachment to external validation. Many people tie their happiness to how they are perceived by others. They seek approval, fear criticism, and constantly worry about their reputation. But the Stoics remind us that the opinions of others are beyond our control. No matter how much we try to please everyone, we will always encounter criticism, misunderstandings, and judgment. To base our emotional well-being on something as unstable as public opinion is to surrender our peace of mind to forces outside ourselves. The person who understands this liberates themselves from the need for external validation and focuses instead on living with integrity, acting according to their values regardless of how they are perceived. The practice of detachment from external outcomes does not mean indifference or a lack of effort. On the contrary, it means engaging fully with life while accepting that results are never guaranteed. The Stoic does not sit passively, avoiding action. They give their best effort in everything they do, but they remain detached from the outcome. A farmer may plant seeds with care, water the crops, and do everything necessary to ensure a good harvest, but they cannot control the weather. A student may study diligently for an exam, but they cannot control the exact questions they will face. A professional may work tirelessly to build a business, but they cannot control the market's response. Understanding this difference between effort and outcome is key to inner peace. Fear and anxiety often arise from focusing too much on things we cannot control. The more we try to predict or manipulate the future, the more anxious we become about what might go wrong. But the future, like the opinions of others, is beyond our grasp. The only thing within our power is the present moment. The Stoics emphasize the importance of living fully in the now, taking each situation as it comes without being paralyzed by fear of what lies ahead. Instead of obsessing over what might happen tomorrow, they train themselves to focus on what could be done today. This mindset removes much of the stress that comes from uncertainty, replacing it with a sense of control over what truly matters. Letting go of external control also transforms how we handle personal relationships. Many conflicts arise because people try to change or control others, expecting them to act a certain way, think a certain way, or feel a certain way. But the Stoic understands that other people's behavior is beyond their control. Trying to force change in others only leads to frustration and resentment. Instead, they focus on controlling their own actions, leading by example, and accepting that everyone has their own journey. This does not mean tolerating mistreatment or neglecting personal boundaries, but it does mean recognizing that true peace comes from managing oneself, not dictating others. One of the most powerful exercises for reinforcing this mindset is the practice of negative visualization. Instead of fearing loss, the Stoics prepared for it mentally, imagining potential difficulties in advance. This was not pessimism, but rather a tool to cultivate gratitude and resilience. By mentally rehearsing adversity, they reduced its emotional impact. If they lost a possession, a job, or even a loved one, they had already trained their mind to accept the impermanence of all things. This practice does not remove sadness, but prevents unnecessary suffering caused by denial and resistance. By focusing on what is within our control, we develop an internal stability that external events cannot shake. The world will always be unpredictable, people will always have their own opinions, and life will rarely unfold exactly as we wish. But none of these factors need to disturb our peace. The Stoic path is not about controlling the outside world, but about mastering the inner world. This shift in focus, from the uncontrollable to the controllable, creates a deep sense of freedom. A person who understands this is no longer at the mercy of circumstances. They do not waste energy complaining about what they cannot change. They take full responsibility for what is in their power and let go of everything else. The true measure of personal strength is not found in controlling others or manipulating outcomes, but in governing oneself. A person who masters their thoughts, emotions, and actions is truly free, no matter what external challenges arise. When something does not go as planned, they do not see it as a failure, but as a new challenge to navigate. They do not rely on others for validation, but find confidence in their own integrity. They do not waste energy resisting what they cannot change, but focus entirely on what they can improve. Ultimately, the Stoic approach to control is a path to peace. It teaches us to stop suffering over what is beyond our reach, to detach from external expectations, and to focus fully on the present moment. It is not about passivity, but about choosing where to direct our energy wisely. The world will continue to be unpredictable, but we do not have to be shaken by every change, every criticism, or every unexpected challenge. We can train ourselves to focus only on what truly belongs to us, our mind, our actions, and our character. And in doing so, we achieve the greatest form of control over ourselves. Life is full of challenges, conflicts, and moments that test our patience. Most people experience these situations from within, fully immersed in their emotions, reacting impulsively to whatever is happening. When we are caught up in emotions like anger, frustration, or fear, our judgment becomes clouded, and we often make decisions that we later regret. But the Stoics understood that wisdom does not come from reacting emotionally. It comes from observing with clarity, creating distance between oneself and the immediate emotional response. The ability to step back from a situation and analyze it as an observer rather than a participant is one of the most powerful skills a person can develop. It is the key to making rational decisions, avoiding unnecessary suffering, and maintaining inner peace even in the face of adversity. The Stoics often spoke about the importance of seeing life from a broader perspective. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, frequently reminded himself to view his problems as if he were looking at them from above. as if he were an outsider analyzing the situation with detachment. This practice, known as the view from above, allows a person to see that most problems are temporary, that emotions are fleeting, and that many conflicts are insignificant in the grand scheme of things. When something happens that triggers an emotional response, the immediate reaction is usually intense, as if the world depends on that moment. But if we imagine looking at the situation from a distance, from a year into the future, from 5 years, or even from the perspective of an outsider, it suddenly loses much of its power. One of the greatest sources of unnecessary suffering is identifying too closely with our emotions. When anger arises, we say, "I am angry," as if that emotion defines who we are. But the Stoics remind us that emotions are simply passing states, not permanent identities. Instead of saying, "I am angry," we can say, "I am experiencing anger." This subtle shift creates space between the self and the emotion, making it easier to observe rather than be consumed by it. When we take on the observer's perspective, we no longer see emotions as absolute truths, but as temporary experiences that come and go. This simple mental adjustment can transform the way we handle difficult situations, preventing emotional reactions from controlling our decisions. Stepping back and adopting the observer's mindset also allows us to break free from the illusion of personal importance. Many conflicts arise because people take things too personally, assuming that every disagreement, every criticism, and every failure is a direct attack on their worth. But when viewed from a neutral perspective, most of these situations have little to do with personal value. If someone insults you, is it really about you? Or is it about their own insecurities and frustrations? If something doesn't go as planned, does it mean you are a failure? Or is it simply part of life's unpredictable nature? By detaching from the emotional charge of these moments, we gain the ability to respond with calm and wisdom rather than with reactionary defensiveness. This perspective also applies to decision-making. Many people struggle with choices because they are too emotionally invested in the outcome. They fear making the wrong decision, losing an opportunity, or facing negative consequences. But the Stoic understands that no decision is truly life-defining. By stepping back and looking at choices objectively, we can see that most outcomes are manageable and that anxiety only clouds judgment. The observer's mindset allows us to analyze situations with greater logic and less attachment, leading to more rational and effective decisions. Another essential aspect of distancing oneself from emotions is understanding the impermanence of all things. The Stoics constantly reflected on the fleeting nature of life, recognizing that nothing, neither joy nor suffering, lasts forever. When viewed from this perspective, even the most painful moments lose some of their intensity. A disagreement with a loved one, a failure in business, a moment of embarrassment, none of these will matter in the long run. This is not to say that emotions should be ignored or suppressed, but rather that they should be placed in their proper context. When seen from a broader perspective, what once seemed overwhelming often becomes insignificant. One practical way to cultivate the observer's mindset is through writing. When faced with an emotionally charged situation, taking a few minutes to write about it as if explaining it to someone else can provide clarity. By turning a chaotic internal experience into a structured narrative, emotions lose their grip and logic takes over. Another technique is to ask, what advice would I give a friend in this situation? When advising others, people tend to be more objective and less influenced by emotions. Applying this same method to oneself helps separate emotional reactions from rational thought. The Stoics also practiced premeditation, the act of mentally preparing for challenges before they happen. Instead of being caught off guard by difficulties, they anticipated them and rehearsed how they would respond with wisdom rather than emotion. This technique reduces emotional reactivity by making potential difficulties feel less surprising. When something negative happens, instead of reacting impulsively, the Stoic can say, I expected this. Now, How do I handle it wisely? Embracing the observer's perspective does not mean becoming emotionally distant or disconnected. It means experiencing emotions fully without letting them dictate actions. It means acknowledging fear without being ruled by it, recognizing anger without acting on it, and feeling sadness without falling into despair. The goal is not to eliminate emotions, but to manage them in a way that aligns with reason and virtue. This ability to step back and see situations from a distance also improves relationships. Many conflicts escalate not because of the situation itself, but because of emotional reactions to it. A small disagreement turns into a major argument because neither side can detach from their emotions long enough to see the bigger picture. But when one person remains calm, observes the situation with neutrality, and chooses their words carefully, the conflict often dissolves before it escalates. The observer's mindset fosters better communication, greater understanding, and stronger connections with others. Ultimately, the ability to detach from emotions and act with wisdom is what separates those who are controlled by life from those who control their experience of life. The Stoics knew that the world is unpredictable, that people will say and do things that are out of our control, and that emotions will always arise. But they also knew that how we experience life depends not on what happens, but on how we interpret and respond to it. The observer's perspective allows us to move through life with greater peace, resilience, and clarity, transforming challenges into opportunities for growth. When we learn to step back, to see our emotions not as absolute truths but as temporary states, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. We become less reactive, less dependent on external validation, and more in control of our actions. The world does not change, but our experience of it does. We no longer feel overwhelmed by every setback, every conflict, or every criticism. Instead, we face them with a steady mind and a calm heart, knowing that wisdom is not in reacting but in observing, understanding, and responding with clarity. By embracing the observer's perspective, we gain the ability to navigate life with grace, unaffected by the chaos around us, and anchored in the unshakable strength of a well-trained mind. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, where constant chatter fills every space, and where opinions are expressed impulsively, silence has become an underrated yet powerful tool. Most people believe that influence comes from speaking loudly, asserting opinions, and proving their knowledge in every conversation. But the Stoics understood that true power does not come from speaking excessively. It comes from knowing when to remain silent, when to observe, and when to let actions speak instead of words. Mastering the power of silence is not just a tactic. It is a discipline that allows for greater control over oneself, over interactions with others, and over the situations one encounters. Those who talk less and act more tend to command more respect, make fewer mistakes, and cultivate a presence that is both mysterious and authoritative. Silence is not about avoidance or passivity. It is about strategic restraint, about knowing that not everything requires a response, and that sometimes the strongest statement is no statement at all. People often speak because they feel the need to fill space, to prove their worth, or to gain approval. But excessive talking can reveal insecurity, expose weaknesses, and diminish influence. The one who speaks less listens more, observes more, and gains insight that those who are constantly talking often miss. A person who remains silent in moments of tension, instead of reacting emotionally, maintains an air of mystery and control. They force others to wonder what they are thinking, creating an advantage simply by withholding information. The ability to remain silent and act instead of speaking is a skill that requires patience and self-discipline. Many people respond impulsively to criticism, speak in anger, or try to dominate conversations with their opinions. But every unnecessary word weakens their position. The Stoics practice silence not as a sign of submission, but as a demonstration of mastery over oneself. By choosing words carefully and only speaking when necessary, they ensured that when they did speak, their words carried weight. When someone rarely speaks but does so with clarity and confidence, people listen. In contrast, those who talk excessively are often ignored because their words are diluted by their own frequency. Another powerful aspect of silence is that it prevents unnecessary conflict. Many arguments, misunderstandings, and damaged relationships are caused not by actual problems, but by poorly chosen words. A simple moment of silence before responding to provocation can prevent escalation. Instead of reacting with anger, the person who masters silence takes a deep breath, evaluates whether a response is necessary, and often chooses restraint. This does not mean tolerating disrespect, but rather recognizing that many battles are won not by fighting, but by refusing to engage. When someone tries to provoke a reaction and is met with calm silence, they lose power over the situation. The one who remains composed maintains control. Silence also enhances decision-making. When people speak too quickly, they commit to ideas before fully thinking them through. The Stoic approach is to pause, to think before speaking, and to ensure that words align with wisdom rather than emotion. Great leaders throughout history have understood this principle. They speak with intention, never wasting words, and they listen far more than they talk. In negotiations, the one who speaks less holds the advantage. They let the other party reveal more information, expose their weaknesses, and fill the silence with unnecessary details. The one who remains silent gathers insight, appearing composed and in control. In personal relationships, silence can also be a sign of strength. Many people feel the need to explain themselves excessively, justify their actions, or defend their position when criticized. But the Stoic understands that not every criticism requires a response. Often, silence is the most powerful reply. It demonstrates confidence, a refusal to be emotionally manipulated, and an understanding that actions speak louder than words. Instead of arguing, explaining, or seeking approval, the Stoic simply continues living according to their principles, allowing their actions to be the true testament of their character. This principle applies not only in words, but in life itself. Many people talk about what they're going to do, what goals they will achieve, and what changes they will make, yet they never take action. They mistake speaking about something for doing it. But the Stoic knows that true achievement comes not from words, but from quiet, consistent effort. Talking about plans is easy. Executing them is difficult. The one who remains silent, works in the background, and lets results speak for themselves ultimately earns more respect than the one who constantly announces their intentions but never follows through. Silence also creates an aura of mystery. People who reveal everything about themselves too quickly lose the advantage of unpredictability. The Stoic, by speaking less and revealing only what is necessary, maintains an element of intrigue. Others cannot easily read them, making them more difficult to manipulate or deceive. In contrast, those who talk excessively often give away too much information about their weaknesses, their insecurities, and their strategies. By practicing controlled silence, one can create a presence that commands respect without demanding it. One of the greatest obstacles to mastering silence is the fear of being misunderstood. Many feel the need to clarify, to over-explain, or to seek validation through words. But the Stoic understands that silence is often more powerful than explanation. When someone remains silent in response to an insult, they show that the words hold no power over them. When they do not react to gossip or criticism, they demonstrate self-assurance. The less one feels the need to defend every action with words, the more confident and unshakable they appear. Training oneself to use silence effectively requires practice. In conversations, it means pausing before responding, thinking carefully before speaking, and resisting the urge to fill every empty moment with words. In conflict, it means allowing emotions to settle before engaging, choosing battles wisely, and recognizing that silence can sometimes deliver a stronger message than argument. In personal ambition, it means focusing more on action than on announcements, working quietly towards goals without feeling the need to constantly declare intentions. The ability to speak less and act more is one of the greatest forms of self-discipline. It requires patience, emotional control, and a willingness to let go of the need for constant validation. But those who master this skill gain a powerful advantage in every area of life. They become more respected, more in control, and more effective in their actions. They understand that silence is not weakness but strength, that speaking less does not mean knowing less, and that true power comes not from noise but from presence. Ultimately, the Stoic approach to silence is about reclaiming control over one's words, one's reactions, and one's energy. The world is full of noise, full of people seeking attention, full of voices competing to be heard. But the wise person knows that real influence does not come from shouting the loudest. It comes from speaking only when necessary, from acting instead of announcing, and from letting results speak for themselves. In mastering the art of silence, one does not withdraw from life but engages with it more effectively, more deliberately, and with far greater impact. Silence is power, and those who wield it wisely hold an unshakable advantage.